Tom, I want to start, I guess we'll figure out what the tuition story here in Quebec. There are a couple of different elements today, but I wanted you to hear because he's sort of been MIA up until today. Quebec's not only finance minister responsible for relations with Anglos in Quebec.
Who went to McGill as well.
Who went to McGill. And this is Eric Girard. When asked about where you've been, what's going on, who said this?
I understand that they're currently in discussion with Minister Derry, and these discussions will continue. Thank you very much.
See you. Got to go. Bye-bye. No more questions next time. Ta-ta.
Yeah,
ciao for now.
Baby. Yeah, I know.
So what do you think?
Well, right now, Eric Girard is actually, to be fair to him, making statements that are probably not pleasing everybody in the Premier's office. So yesterday he was out there quite clearly signaling that he hasn't changed his mind since he made the statement a couple of weeks ago to the Chamber of Commerce big meeting and said, look, one of the reasons we're falling behind Ontario is we're not doing enough to keep up our great institutions of higher learning. And he lamented the fact that McGill had fallen behind U of T, University of Toronto, in certain rankings that are published. McGill's ahead, in first place in some, but not in others. So that's a good thing. It shows that he understands the importance of maintaining Montreal as the biggest, along with Boston, the two biggest university cities in North America are Montreal and Boston. And we've got world-class places here, the same way they have world-class places in Boston. But, of course, we don't treat ours very well because there are two separate games being played here. The first game, the simplest one, is welcome to the language wars. We're back 40 years ago. Legault, the same guy who was quoted by Graham Fraser as saying, I hate the English. Well, that guy has decided that the best way to fight the PQ that just trounced him in a big by-election in Quebec City is to go all in on the language file. So we're going to go after the the English universities, and we're going to say, the problem is we hear too much English spoken in the street. Look, I've been involved in the language file going back to the 1970s. I started in the Justice Department in the 70s. First big language case was, the language of legislation. I worked for a few years at the Conseil de la langue française. I was the Director of Legal Affairs at Alliance Quebec. I've been at this for a long time. I have never seen anything this abject. To have a government saying that the problem in our society, it's not the lack of housing, it's not that our school system has walls that are falling down or that you can't get service in a hospital. No. The problem is you're hearing too much English in the streets. And this is, as they say, contributing to the anglicization of Montreal without any evidence, because you don't need evidence in Quebec. All you need to do is express an opinion. And as far as some people are concerned, that becomes a fact. It's not. And it's only fair to start looking at this stuff with a jaundiced eye and saying, you know what, this is an abject game of playing to the lowest common denominator. We're going after people's worst feelings, and you're playing to the base of the CAQ outside of Montreal. And by the way, Montreal has become a place of horror. Anybody who doesn't actually go to the place and know what it's like on a day-to-day basis, you wouldn't want to have anything to do with the Montreal that's described by the CAQ and by François Legault. So they've got their language minister out there, Roberge, who did such an excellent job in education. Now we're stuck with him there. He's there with Madame Derry. Pascale Derry, I still can't believe that she's lent her name to this exercise. And I had a long chat with her earlier in the week. On Tuesday, I had a long chat with her. And it just doesn't hold together. Most of their facts and figures are wrong. And by the way, I'm going to give a rare footnote and say that anybody who's interested in reading the best article on the details of this, it's written on a source called Substack, in one word, Substack, and it's by Paul Wells, the very well-known guy who used to write a lot in Maclean's, does a lot of French and English TV, very deeply knowledgeable. He has gone through this, and by the way, he works a lot on this one with the president of Concordia University, Mr. Carr, and it's an extraordinarily good piece. He just tears apart all of the weak reasoning, the bad research, the false statements that the CAQ has used to try to justify this unprecedented attack on the educational institutions of the English-speaking community and of Montreal, because as Mayor Plante correctly said yesterday, this is going to have a negative effect on Montreal's place in the world, its perception in the world, and what our ranking is as a top university city. It's an unbelievable shame. I do read one positive thing into what Girard is saying, that there's so much pressure going on right now that some of them are going to have to start thinking of backing off on this thing.
All right, well, let me sort of as an addendum to this, because it relates to the same topic. First of all, McGill's decision to kill that $50 million French program. What do you think about that? They're calling it retaliation from some sources in Quebec City. And number two, where are the feds on this? Has anybody waded into this?
There have been a couple of vague statements. I think I remember Pablo Rodriguez sort of mumbling into his beard about this. But I don't mind people mumbling into their beards, of course. But all kidding aside, they're all terrified of this subject. Look, you remember when Emanuela Lambropoulos just said, it's not obvious that French is in decline in Montreal. I mean, the world fell down on her. She was beaten up by Mélanie Joly, and I can't believe anybody would say that. Well, what's your evidence otherwise? There's never been a higher proportion of people in Greater Montreal who could hold a conversation in French. And that's not a fact that they want to hear. They just want to keep affirming that, one newspaper went out and, for 36 hours and checked every store they could find and finally found a sole person who went and hid behind the boxes at the back of the store because they didn't speak French. And that becomes proof that nobody in Montreal speaks French. You just can't get service in French in Montreal. It's just a fact that everybody knows. So this is what we've been going through now. It's a complete reset of really old, talk about hits from the Blitz. We're going through the same thing with Paul Saint-Pierre Plamondon. I mean, he's going to bring out the budget of the first of an independent Quebec, don't you know? And, it's unbelievable. Legault said he's all about the economy. His economy minister, his finance minister, is saying this is hurting the economy, and Legault is absolutely not listening.
Okay, and was McGill right to do what they did, Tom?
The $50 million, they announced right away that they're suspending it. They're putting it on hold. So they haven't canceled it. So that's an important distinction. I don't think that they should have taken the bait, frankly. I think that they should have come out with very strong statements about the cuts themselves, but to go tit for tat, that's almost a welcome thing. That allows people in Quebec City to say, you see, they hate us. So I think that it would, but McGill, despite the fact that they've got some of the smartest people in the country, McGill is just woefully incompetent when it comes to public discourse here in Quebec. It's almost as if it's a spaceship that's set down in a field north of Sherbrooke, and nobody at McGill has a clue about how to deal with these issues. There used to be a time when people at a certain level could talk to each other, but Legault's immune to that. Legault's got this is the bumpkin who went and met the governor of California, and said, in Quebec everybody's Catholic, and I've come up with this law. And Gavin Newsom was just thunderstruck. He said, I'm not talking about that stuff, because he had been briefed on it. This is François Legault. This is what he projects onto the world stage. Bill 96. We're going to come and seize your computers and check whether or not there's enough French in there, and we can do it without a warrant. This is François Legault.
Okay, but Tom, I want to come back to the McGill thing for a second, because to me, I get that it could be perceived as pettiness. I do get that. However, it makes a whole lot of sense. They're going to take a huge hit financially. Every penny is going to count. $50 million invested to help promote French at their university suddenly doesn't make a whole lot of sense anymore. To me, this is the perfect move.
But was this the way to do it? Just to come out and, like today, 2 days later, 3 days later? I still think it would have been a good idea. Maybe not the right tack.
To be fair to McGill, they announced it right away. They announced that they were suspending this thing right away. The big announcement was on Friday. They were already, because they had been given about a 48-hour heads up by Derry, so they were already announcing on Friday, we're suspending this thing. Obviously, we're not going to do it. But that's why I say it was a mug's game to play along, because you had to have a much stronger reaction, almost as if the $50 million wasn't even part of the equation. This is not what we're talking about. We're talking about the lifeblood of our economy, of knowledge, of developing students for the future. One of the best institutions in the world. You're going to be scuppering it. You're going to be attacking it. Here's how we're going to fight back. Crickets. Nothing.
Fair enough.
No concerted effort. No plan. Nothing. And that's what's so disappointing about McGill. They've got all these people who scutter around in offices, but they might as well be living in 1964. They're not up to date on what's happening in Quebec. They haven't followed the curb of the CAQ. They can't take part in these debates, and they're completely being left on the side. So announcing that you're not going to spend that money, to be honest with you, Natasha, that might eventually be the right decision to make once you've exhausted all the other recourses. But right now, it just seems, you see, pettiness. They don't like French. They had a program for French, and they're getting rid of it now.
I get that.
So it becomes a finger-pointing exercise. That's why it's completely useless.
Tom, 60 seconds. What the hell's going on in Alberta and the CPP? Can you explain this to people real quick?
Alberta wants to withdraw from the Canada Pension Plan. Quebec is not in the Canada Pension Plan. We have our own, with the case de dépôt, Régie des Rentes du Québec. They're saying that they own most of it, which is kind of silly. But it's the type of fight that Danielle Smith wants. Trudeau is finally weighing in on it quite strongly, and senior voices in the economic world are weighing in on it, saying it's completely bonkers. The more people say it's bonkers, the more Danielle Smith's going to want to do it. And she stole, like, not just a page, she stole several chapters from the Quebec Don't We Hate Them playbook. So we'll see whether or not she actually pulls it off. It would weaken the pension scheme for everybody else in Canada in the 8 remaining provinces.
Okay. See, we had no time, and I wanted to ask about Paul St. Pierre Plamondon and our new Quebec Army, but that'll have to wait till next week, I guess, Tom, when they release their budget.
Yes. Well,
thank you.
That I'm looking forward to.
I can't wait.